Let's talk about Myrkul, Lord of Bones. For 4 white, black, green, we have a 7/5 god. As long as your life total is less than or equal to half your starting life total, Myrkul is going to have indestructible. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may exile it. If you do, create a creature token that's a copy of that card, except it's an enchantment and loses all other card types. So with this deck, I want to take advantage of my creatures having ETBs and also enchantments entering the battlefield as well. So first, let's talk about the ramp in the deck. Not so exciting, but as for the artifacts, we have Arcane Signet, Golgari Signet, Orzhov Signet, and Selesnya Signet. These can get us colored mana, which is very helpful in this deck because we are at least 3 colors. Next is Solemn Simulacrum, Talisman of Hierarchy, Talisman of Resilience, and Talisman of Unity. Solemn Simulacrum is going to get us a basic land on the battlefield tapped when it enters the battlefield. So initially when we cast it, we get that ETB, and when it later on dies, as long as it's a non-token creature, we can get another basic land whenever it's an enchantment from our commander. And as for the creatures, we have Avacyn's Pilgrim, Elvish Mystic, Farhaven Elf, and Llanowar Elves. These can tap for a colored mana, or like Farhaven Elf, when this enters the battlefield, we're going to get a basic land. So same as Solemn Simulacrum, when it ETBs, we get that basic on the battlefield tap, and it's a possibility we can get 2 ETB triggers with our commander, as long as Farhaven Elf has died. There's also Secure Tribe Elder and Wood Elves. So Secure Tribe Elder lets us sacrifice it. We'll get a basic on the battlefield tapped, and this is great because it has its own sacrifice outlet, so when it dies from sacrificing it, we get that basic. It will come back on the battlefield as an enchantment. We can still sacrifice it and get that basic. And with Wood Elves, it's going to ETB, and we can grab a forest card and put that onto the battlefield. What's great about this is it's not tapped, and it's a forest card, which means we can grab a land that, as long as it has forest in the card subtype, we can put that onto the battlefield. Alright, enough of that boring ramp stuff. Let's move on to the sack outlets in the deck. So we have Blood Baron, Bloodflow Connoisseur, Bloodthrown Vampire, and Carrion Feeder. We can sacrifice a creature and then we get benefits from that creature, but most importantly, we're able to sacrifice our creatures with no additional cost, so we don't have to pay 1 mana and sacrifice a creature. We just care about sacrificing our creatures, and this will trigger our commander. We also have Dimir Houseguard, Drosshopper, and Viscerus here. Now, Dimir Houseguard is really cool because if we need that sack outlet, we can pay the 4 mana, and we can also regenerate Dimir Houseguard, which I'm not bothered with, but what's important, it has Transmute. So if we need another card in our deck that also costs 4 mana, this can be a tutor. So let's move on to the removal of the deck. We have Acidic Slime, Angel of Ruins, Fleshbag Marauder, and Shriekmaw. When these enter the battlefield, we can start taking care of our opponent's threats. So Acidic Slime can target an artifact, enchantment, or land. It also has Death Touch as a 2/2. Angel of Ruins is going to let us exile up to 2 target artifacts and or enchantments. Fleshbag Marauder is going to make each player sacrifice a creature, which isn't going to be harmful for us because we may end up having only enchantments. After sacrificing all of our creatures, we could just sacrifice Fleshbag Marauder. And when that ETBs again, each player has to sacrifice a creature, which that may not affect us. Shriekmaw is going to enter the battlefield and we can destroy target non-artifact, non-black creature. What's great about this is that it has Evoke for 1 and a black. We can actually just pay 1 and a black to cast this spell, and if we do, it's going to be sacrificed when it enters the battlefield. So that means we're going to get 2 triggers of it entering the battlefield from our commander as long as it's on the battlefield. Moving on to the Boardwipes, we have Austere Command and Extinguish All Hope. Austere Command is really cool because we can destroy all creatures, and assuming our commander is indestructible and we destroy all of our creatures, including our opponents, this will not be harmful towards us at all. We can also destroy artifacts and enchantments if needed. Extinguish All Hope is really cool because it destroys all non-enchantment creatures, which again, not going to hurt us one bit. If we happen to lose our creatures, we get them right back with our commander, and they come back as enchantments. Now moving on to my favorite part of any deck tech, that's how we draw cards. We have Ambition's Cost and Ancient Craving. Literally the same card, same mana cost, same effect. 4 mana, draw 3, lose 3 at sorcery speed. Disciple of Bolas. When it enters the battlefield, we sacrifice another creature. We gain X life, draw X cards, where X is that creature's power. There's also Eidolon of Blossoms. This is going to be a great way for us to draw cards because it says whenever this or another enchantment enters the battlefield under our control, we're going to draw a card. What's great about this is that our commander makes the creatures that are non-token, that are dead, turn into enchantments. So we'll draw a card when they come back from dying. I did put Filigree Familiar in here because when it dies, we draw a card. Also, when it enters the battlefield, we're going to gain 2 life, which doesn't hurt us. So let's say we cast the first time, we gain 2 life, we sacrifice it to one of our sack outlets, we draw a card, it enters the battlefield again as an enchantment, we can possibly draw off of Eidolon of Blossoms, and if it later dies to a Boardwipe or whatever, targeting this enchantment now, we get to draw another card. There's also Grim Haru specs. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, draw a card, which is exactly what this deck wants to do. There's Mold Divine Reclamation. When a creature you control dies, you gain 1 life and draw a card. There's also Rite of Harmony. Whenever a creature or enchantment enters the battlefield under your your control this turn, draw a card, and it has flashback for only 4 mana. This is a great way to draw cards all at once. Setessan Champion, so this is same as Eidolon of Blossom. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield, we're going to put a +1/+1 counter on this, and we get to draw a card. Now the last 4 cards, for drawing cards, we have Skyscanner, Spirited Companion, Wall of Blossoms, and Wall of Omens. When these enter the battlefield, we're going to draw a card. So that means when we cast it the first time, we're going to draw, and then when they later die and they enter the battlefield again, we'll draw another card. So 2 cards from these. Let's talk about how we're going to make tokens in the deck. We have Ajani's Chosen, Archon of Sungrace, Armada Worm, and Hornet Queen. So when an enchantment enters the battlefield under our control, we're going to make 2/2s. Specifically 2/2 cats with Ajani's Chosen and 2/2 Pegasus that are flying with Archon's Sons of Grace. And this is really helpful for the deck because since we're sacrificing all of our creatures coming back as enchantments, we can trigger these very often. Now Armada Worm is just going to be a 2-time effect. When it enters the battlefield, we get a 5/5 green worm creature token with trample onto the battlefield. This is also a 5/5 worm with trample, but when it comes back that second time as a token, it's just going to be an ETB trigger for us, which is still very powerful because we're getting a 5/5 worm from this. Hornet Queen is also really great. It is 7 mana for a 2/2 with flying and death touch, but when it enters the battlefield, we're going to create 4 1/1 green insect creature tokens with flying and death touch, and this is going to make our opponents not want to swing at us because they will lose their creatures if we deal them combat damage. We also have Mirror Battlesphere. When this enters the battlefield, we create 4 1/1 colorless mirror creature artifact tokens. So like I said, ETBs are very powerful in this deck. And since our commander is going to be heavily used in the deck, it's also very important that we protect Myrkul. We have Mask of Avacyn and Mirror Shield. So this will give our commander hexproof, which means we can still target it, but our opponents can no longer target it. So if they want to, they're going to have to destroy these equipment first. So let's talk about a card that doesn't really have a category. This is Kodama of the East Tree. This is a 6/6 spirit that costs 4 and 2 green and has reach. When another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, if it wasn't put onto the battlefield with this ability, you may put a permanent with equal or lesser converted mana cost from your hand onto the battlefield. This is a very powerful card in this deck. For example, whenever we put a land onto the battlefield and Kodama happens to be on the battlefield as well, that means we can put another permanent from our hand that's 0 or less converted mana cost. So that means we can put another land from our hand onto the battlefield, so it's like we ramp just for playing a land. Or whenever we play a huge creature like Hornet Queen, 7 converted mana cost, we can drop another thing from our hand that's 7 or less converted mana cost. And ultimately, how we're going to win this deck besides just pure value is with commander damage. So we're going to make our commander unblockable with cards like Prowler's Helm and Vorok Battlehorns. We can give our commander unblockable or have things that say it has trample and it can't be blocked by more than 1 creature, so damage will still hopefully go through. And then we have Oakheart Dryads and Pious Wayfarer. When this or another enchantment enters the battlefield, target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So what can happen in this scenario is, let's say we sacrifice 5 creatures on our battlefield, not including our commander. That means we have 5 triggers of +1/+1 to a target creature because those creatures are going to enter the battlefield as enchantments. That means we can make our commander a 12/10, deal somebody 12 commander damage, which 12 damage is already a lot, but that means they're over halfway to being dead from commander damage. If we can build up another 5 creatures or have both of these creatures out, the Oakheart Dryads and Pious Wayfarer, we can take out one of our opponents. And last I want to mention these 3 cards that are not in the deck, but can make it very powerful. Anointed Procession, Doubling Season, and Parallel Lives. If you love the idea of making a huge amount of tokens, these 3 cards are going to do that for you. They are pretty expensive. Anointed Procession right now is $24, Doubling Season, $83, Parallel Lives, $60. These are not cheap, but if you have the extra budget, these can be added to the deck. If you love this deck tech, you're going to love this one right here. If you'd like to purchase this deck, I'll have a link in the description down below. And this deck is dedicated to one of our patrons, Drewby. Thank you so much for this idea. He gave a $40 to $50 budget for this deck, and it came out to be $40, which is great. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.